This is the gift of being a human being. Is the ability to experience yourself as truth, as love, as compassion.
So this is one of the foundation principles of all practices in any spiritual practice, is related to breath. Because if you're disconnected from your breath, as Tori said, it's like, because the breath is like the link to the divine, it is the link to the all, because there's no place where breath does not exist. So if you're connected through the breath, you're connected to everything. But it's when you become disconnected that all the illnesses and diseases start, because that's when you start separating yourself from the divine nature, which is you. And it's not outside of you, it's also inside of you, because I think it was last week's class. So lesson 5, the main message of lesson 5 was your inner breath becoming one with the outer breath through the breath. So that there's no separation between you anymore. Because it's when we feel the separation that we get ill, that we distance ourselves from our divine nature, from our true source, which is internal as well as external. So it's almost like the more you go inwards into the microcosmos, which is like going smaller, 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 if you go into what it is that your physical body is made of, you go into the micro, which means you're going into the cells, you're going into the atoms. But even an atom is mostly space. And within that space, there's breath, there's spirit there. There's spirits, the presence of spirit is always there. But then, if you go out into cosmos, you also you've got the stars, you've got all of the galaxies, you've got so much big celestial bodies. But even if you go further into space, there's more space. And also there the breath exists. So inner space, outer space, micro, macro, it's all the same thing. It's mostly space. And within that space exists the breath, which makes you part of the whole, which is like the Holy Spirit, the holy breath. You are one with the whole. So this is the thing that connects us. And it's very powerful to understand it from this perspective. Yes, Tori?
I feel like you've been pointing at this for a while, and I feel like it hasn't clicked for me. So I don't understand why it's the breath that connects everything. I understand why space connects everything, because I see spaces everywhere on all levels, in the atom right up to the cosmos. I get space, I think, but I don't get the link to breath. I get that we're breathing air in, but I don't get how breath goes out to the cosmos. I'm missing a link.
Okay. For me personally, I have not yet found the words to express what it is that I've experienced in my life regarding the breath. The only thing I can say is it's almost like, if you can imagine, as we've done so many times during the last 6 weeks of practice, or 3 weeks, of practice, everything is about this expansion and contraction that constantly happens. And it's this expansion and contraction that happens throughout the whole of existence. It doesn't just stop within our bodies. It happens everywhere, even in the cosmos. This is constantly happening. It's not exactly like it's expanding and contracting, but this is constantly happening. So there is a natural breath, a natural movement, a natural flow to everything. And yes, there are also mass expansions and mass contractions that happens when, for instance, you've got an explosion of a star or the creation of a new cosmos, a new universe. These things happen all the time out in space. We don't necessarily know about it, but there's these mass expansions and mass contractions, which is basically like things going into mass and then coming back and contracting and then going to a next cycle. And all of these cycles are linked to the breath. It's almost like there needs to be an inspiration for something like that to happen. There has to be an inspiration which is inspiring, which is literally expanding. It's taking in the breath in order to do this. So I will share with you a personal experience I've had, which I think it's kind of hard to explain what it is that I'm trying to say without giving you my personal experience. And this is not something that I would normally share with people, but I think in this context, it's quite it's a good example to give you even if it's just like a visual, but a reference point for something, which is like, I've had an experience where it was like I was taken out into space, literally, like you just look into this endlessness of cosmos, like stars and planets and things, and you're kind of just in the middle of it. And it was like, as I was looking forward, if you can imagine, and this is kind of a weird because your mind can't comprehend what you're seeing, but it's almost like there was a horizon, and at this horizon there was light, but the rest of the cosmos was completely dark and filled with stars and planets and everything else, but mostly darkness, with just on the horizon there was a light. But the one thing that was consistent throughout all of this was this breath that just did this with everything. And I could literally feel the cosmos breathe. It was like, it wasn't just pure space. Space is one thing, but there was something within the space that made it breathe. And within this breath, everything existed. It was like all of creation was part of this one breath, and it was just doing this. And it is the most peaceful feeling I've ever had in my whole entire life. Because it was like seeing everythingness and the nothingness, and how everything just has this breath. And I could actually hear the breath as well. So it's a very beautiful experience, but because I've had that experience, I have a reference point, which probably you don't have at this stage. But my hope is that at some point you will have that experience where maybe it's not exactly like that, but that you can actually experience the breath beyond your breath, the spirit that breathes you, because then you're not breathing anymore. It's almost like you become part of the breath which is breathing you. So you dissolve into that bigger breath, which is the spirit of all things. So there's no more separation between you and it. And that's part of what the spiritual healing is about, is becoming part of the whole. So yes, there is the space, and within the space there is the breath. They kind of go hand in hand. It's almost like the flow that happens through the space, if you can imagine this.